Chivas Watson, we bumped into you just last year with the family of Rodney Reed, um, Sandra Reed, Rodney Reed, Roderick Reed, the Reed family, having a protest outside the Supreme Court of Texas. We had met previously during the media tour. Charles and I met you with when we were working on Melissa Lucio's case, and and then you showed up just walking through, and boom, and suddenly you came last year to the Fasting Vigil, and now you're back. And this guy's all over the place working on all kinds of cases, and he's going to share a bit with us tonight. Chivas Watson.
Greetings to our listeners from around the world, to all of our neighbors here outside of the Supreme Court, to all of you who've contributed to the shared value of starving for justice. I wish to begin by sharing a poem from Langston Hughes, circa 1930. I am so tired of waiting. Aren't you? For the world to become good and beautiful and kind. Let us take a knife and cut the world in two and see what worms are eating at the rind. I'm Chivas Watson, founder and executive director of Austin, Texas Based Service Agency Working Group 512 in coalition and representing also Texas Prisons Community Advocates, TPCA, Just Leadership USA, from prison cells to PhD, Big Homie Street Mentoring in San Antonio, the Death Row Soul Collective, and I'm a proud advocate with death penalty action, as Abe mentioned. In chasing justice through fighting for freedom, I've worked in 5 cities across Texas: Austin, Abilene, Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio, cutting the state in two and sending caution to the winds. Redefining my pursuit of happiness, I found the worms eating away at the powers commonly granted into the people, such as our right to privacy against unreasonable searches and seizures, our right to voluntary travel, our right to due process and exculpatory evidence, and our right to have police powers enforced only through constitutional restriction. As the En Masse Incarceration reporter on KPFT 90.1 FM Houston's The Prison Show, I engage with international audiences regarding the impact the carceral legal system has on our lives. The worms certainly eat away at our free shout-outs weekly, when we learn of a parole set-off or new execution date. And they absolutely bite at the hard-fought love shared between family members who sacrifice to support and fund inmate accounts. When I landed at Reagan last week, I was struck by DC's beauty and varieties of culture. I wondered if Joe Biden might hear me, if Mike Johnson would even hear me, if Nikki Haley would hear me, if I screamed in devout pain that each branch of the government must adhere to the Constitution, and the judicial branch must not be allowed to assume or exercise legislative or executive powers. Today, with the news of Donald Trump receiving some immunity for the intentional crimes he committed on January 6th, the 6-3 decision of the judicial actors who work in the building behind us truly represented those worms that Hughes wrote about in his poem. Does Joe Biden know that he has a serious decision to make soon? Whether he's reelected or granted his walking papers, he can surely make the conscious decision to redress our grievances against his tenure and commute federal death row.
That's right.
Joe, Kamala, we beg of you to not be like these worms I speak of. As the walls of America continue to clash and close in on our freedoms and liberties, as the conservatives' promise of Project 2025 continue to develop, I'm constantly reminded that freedom is not without a constant struggle. To our audience this evening, is it for Billy Allen to sustain mentally, emotionally, psychologically in his 26th year on federal death row? How about Julius Jones, wrongfully convicted and incarcerated since 1999 in Oklahoma, yet granted clemency for a crime he never committed? And what about Melissa Lucio, trapped in a Texas prison for 16 years, sentenced to die and now awaiting her trial court to rewrite their wrongs? Couldn't we agree that for her freedom, it certainly has been a constant struggle? Freedom is not without justice, and justice is not without freedom. Thus, I continue to starve for justice. Dr. Reuben Jonathan Miller of the University of Chicago's Crown School of Social Work writes in his book, Halfway Home, Race, Punishment, and the Afterlife of Mass Incarceration, you cannot treat or arrest or perhaps even reform your way out of mass incarceration, because mass incarceration is about citizenship, not criminal behavior. And citizenship is about belonging. After my release in a Texas prison, or after my release from a Texas prison in 2020, I've worked hard to fuel my dream to achieve a sense of belonging, a freedom that can't be taken away from me, but also from others by the long tail of mass incarceration. I've got 75 clients around the state, from recently released persons to substance abuse recovery, from legal education and research to several individuals who are currently incarcerated and depend on me for support. In 2023, I touched 17 states with my organization in our efforts to resolve needs and create solutions. 1 out of 5 Texans suffer hunger, so we've rescued 14 million pounds of food. We've rescued 14 million pounds of food waste and completed more than 47,000 successful grocery deliveries in 4 years this very month. Incarcerated mothers represent an ever-growing demographic in maternal morbidity and mortality rates, so we hired a doula and a birth worker and have helped steer over 24 successful pregnancies and labor outcomes since 2022. Homelessness is at an all-time high across America, so this year we've helped nearly 100 people gain emergency and transitional supportive housing, and each person has received a catalog of new and used furniture items. Since 2021, we've done over 12,000 items delivered, and we've also recovered and distributed 890 televisions to low-income households. In urban communities in Houston, Austin, and San Antonio, I work to prevent and interrupt violence in gang-heavy neighborhoods where youth and adults are filled with misunderstandings and chaotic approaches to each other. Since 2022, we've distributed over 4,000 tablets, phones, home hotspots, and computers. And we also teach Google 101 and online access classes to folks suffering a digital divide. In the last year in Austin, we've distributed roughly $150,000 in transit passes to folks needing mobility assistance, and our mobile clothing closets currently have over $250,000 in women's clothing and shoes, and $175,000 in men's clothing and shoes usually on Wednesdays. I'm inside of the Travis County 331st District Court, working in their drug diversion court as the court vendor, connecting impacted persons to employment, clothing, and other solutions. I pick up persons that are in jail and are being released to treatment facilities, and we've been providing Narcan to communities before it was a thing to do. Last night, as Abe and I were walking to where we were staying, I received calls from a participatory defense agency in Houston to brainstorm on how we can gain the freedom of a man named Blaze Vega, who's been locked away in the Harris County Jail for 6 years on a murder allegation that he's simply innocent of. Daily, we receive calls from parents who ask me to counsel and advise their incarcerated loved one, and weekly, I touch base with my pen pals across America, such as Edgar Garcia, who is currently on federal death row in Indiana with Billy Allen. I also go back inside Texas prisons as a reentry and mental health peer specialist to train soon-to-be released incarcerated individuals on leadership practices prior to their release. A client of mine serving 40 years in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice's Garza West unit, innocent and wrongfully convicted, had his first appeal heard before Texas's Fourth Court of Appeals last month in less than a year of his trial conviction. Everything my organization does seeks to open doors and create pathways of success so that when a brother like Daniel Gwynn returns home after serving 30 years on Pennsylvania death row, he's got a guardrail of assistance to hold on to while he evolves, slowly but surely. Because citizenship, again, is about belonging. And although I've completed over 2,000 projects since May 2020 and completed 7 leadership fellowships since June 2020, I've also applied to over 175 jobs, and I haven't gotten one. I listened to Terry, I listened to Suzanne, I listened to George, and my journey of hope has absolutely ascended from violence to healing, and I'm still starving for justice. The only answer I've found is abolition. Did you know that out of 102 total prisons in Texas, 72 of them have no air conditioning? Were you aware that in 2023, 334 persons suffered heat-related deaths in Texas prisons? I'm inviting you to learn more about the 85 to Stay Alive campaign, where we're demanding the governor, Texas State Legislator, and Texas Department of Criminal Justice Board to ensure that they follow Texas jail standards. which require temperature control between 65 and 85 degrees. Texas Prisoners Community Advocates is bringing our mock cell exhibit around the state to universities and faith-based spaces this year, inviting community members to spend 7 minutes with me inside of a solitary confinement cell. We'd love to bring the 85 to Stay Alive campaign across the country to provoke national pressure to our state officials as states such as Florida, Kansas, Alaska, Montana, Georgia, and Alabama deal with the same cruel, unusual, and inhumane treatment of incarcerated individuals. Our next mock cell exhibit will be our Day of Mourning, held on Nelson Mandela Day in Houston, Texas, on July 18th and 19th, 2024, at Greenhouse International Church in the Greens Point neighborhood of Houston. So let me ask you in the audience a question. If the AC in your house broke, how long would you take to get it fixed? The tax dollars of Texans and also other citizens in the aforementioned states are being egregiously spent. My client in Garza West, I mentioned, has lost 100 pounds in the last year. Again, the only answer I see is breaking our loved ones free from the chains and the traps of treason and tyranny in the name of abolition. Do you feel me? I'm so tired of waiting. I'm so tired of starving. Aren't you? I spend much time researching and educating myself in the law in the name of guys I know or once knew. Ivan Cantu, murdered on Texas death row. Carl Buntium, executed in pain on Texas death row. Also some guys I never knew, but am inspired by, such as Rodney Reed, innocent on Texas death row. Taurus Sells on Texas death row. Darius Elam, serving a life sentence in TDCJ's Darrington unit. Francis Newton, murdered on Texas death row. In my research, I've learned that each, in the trial phase, failed to have the following legal motions filed: a motion to suppress evidence, a motion to compel, a motion to preclude, a motion in limine. Lastly, I found in my research that none of the names I mentioned in the pretrial phase had a dismissal evaluation shared with prosecutions by a defense attorney, where a defense attorney can help their client negotiate a dismissal before it gets to the trial phase. I found that none of these were filed. So even in my research, after I take a knife and I split criminal law in two, one side having the actus rea and the other having the mens rea, I find the worms, the same worms mentioned in Langston Hughes' poem from 1930, eating away at the rhyme. See, I can't help but speak of liberation when informing you that there is no other solution in resolving the wrongs of this criminal justice system but to destroy it and tear it to granular pieces. Allow me to use the words of Brian Stevenson, founder of Equal Justice Initiative, who said, "The true measure of our character is how we treat the poor, the disfavored, the accused, the incarcerated, and the condemned." And I can't help but think, if we could truly, I was just talking about this with some folks yesterday, I think with you, Kat. Why not organize the worst convictions on death row and give a brother or a sister, after doing the hard time, each a choice to be either released and become who they dreamed and desired to evolve to be, or to remain on the inside for the remainder of their days? How many of our brothers and sisters could return to our communities and be the true examples of transforming pain into purpose? I know Rodney Reed would be a soldier of righteousness in Central Texas. I know Kevin Keith would be an angel of hope in Crestline, Ohio, and around the country. I know Richard Glossop would be an extreme influencer, helping many find the patients they never had before. And I know Melissa Lucio. Not if, but when Melissa Lucio is released, she will be a profound example and influence to mothers around the world who've been separated from their kids and loved ones for some time. You know, again, I met Abe and Charles back in the spring of 2021 together, as they remain to this day. And in the humid Austin weather, they were hot on the trail to achieve a stay of execution for Melissa. I'll never forget. They didn't ask me about my charges. They didn't ask me about my failures. They received me as a brother and established a loving community around me, you know, giving me that sense of belonging I mentioned earlier. And that's what I find here. They've supported me, and they've also inspired my efforts to help save and change lives in this country and continue fighting against executions no matter where I go. Thus, I don't hold on to what Ramiro Gonzalez did, nor what Taurus Sells did. I believe that we are more than our worst mistakes, our worst days, and our worst seasons. So the next time you consider how tired you are, how much you've been waiting, remember that I'm with you and you're not alone. We both want the world to become good, to be both beautiful and kind, but also fair. As if equal justice under law was tangible and true, not just etched and hanging behind us, ignored as it is daily. We must continue to light the fire and fuel our dream for this system to be destroyed and rebuilt, but only in our shared and renewed visions and values, so that the collective dreams of these past 31 years of the fast and vigil become true. I am so tired of waiting, aren't you? For the world to become good and beautiful and kind. Let us take a knife and cut the world in two and see what worms are eating at the rind. The words of Langston Hughes remain true and remain relevant. The only answer is abolition. I'm hungry. I'm starving. Please feel free to reach me at 512-953-3980 or 832-598-1347 or via email at workinggroup512@gmail.com. Visit our link tree to learn more about our work. But after 1,591 executions and counting, can you all scream abolish the death penalty with me? Yes. 1, 2, 3. Abolish the death penalty. Thank you. And may the fast and vigil live on until we say it with me again. Abolish the death penalty.